Last time on Vintage HLC Show and Tell, we looked at the Barbara Jane shape that was made by Homer Laughlin and several other companies for Quaker Oats. There's the ivory color back stamp with the L underneath for Homer Laughlin. This was a Sebring shape, and many potteries shared in its production. Today we're going to look at two more. We're going to look at Trellis and Tudor Rose. So we'll start with Trellis. And like Barbara Jane, Trellis was an extensive line of dinnerware. It was the second one, maybe the third one that Frederick Reed created when he came to Homer Laughlin. He arrived in, I believe it was August 1927, and made three shapes virtually simultaneously: Newell, Trellis, and Old Roman. And it's called Trellis because of the little lattice or trellis-like embossing. So they sent samples to Quaker Oats, and Quaker Oats approved it to be used so that they could sell it, or I should say sell boxes of oats with these pieces in the boxes. And we'll look at two advertisements. The first one is from October 1929, and it shows 5 pieces: the 7-inch plate, the oatmeal, the fruit cup, teacup, and saucer. The second one comes from February 1930, and it has 2 additional pieces, the sugar and the creamer. So here's an example of a 7-inch plate. And there's your little decals that are used, scattered sprigs, no edge line, and it has a special marking. Trellis with an L underneath, that's for Homer Laughlin. As we saw with ivory color, the potteries involved had their own initial underneath the marking. Before they came up with that particular marking, they had several options. This is a photocopy from the art department at Homer Laughlin, or today the Fiesta Tableware Company, that shows some of the alternates for the trellis back stamp. And of course this is the one that was used. And this memo is dated 7/10/1929. From this date we are to use this stamp on all Quaker Oats items. Mr. O'Grady, he was the purchasing agent at Quaker Oats, asked us to send him about 6 stamps so he could send samples to the other potteries of the new trademark. Also the number of the stamp and where purchased. In this case, the Quality Stamp Company of East Liverpool, Ohio. And it was stamp number 303. So the other potteries involved included Sebring and Lee Potters, W.S. George, Taylor Swift and Taylor, Edwin M. Knowles, and they would have had their own little initial underneath the trellis back stamp. There's a trellis sugar, and the decal was also used on larger pieces of trellis like this 11-inch platter. Now one thing about this marking, this would have been done under the glaze before it even got a decals or any other decoration. And if the ware was less than perfect, because Quaker Oats was kind of picky about the quality of the ware, if it was less than perfect, then they wouldn't use it with this glaze and these decals. So what happens is you will find other lines of trellis with that trellis marking, like this one. That does not mean that this creamer was part of a Quaker Oats promotion. It means it got mixed in. We're going to see that with Tudor Rose as well. Same is true with this cup and saucer in the Depression light yellow glaze. It's the trellis shape, but it's marked with the older ivory color marking. So again, this was not a Quaker Oats promotion. This was part of a line of trellis dinnerware where the saucer got mixed in. Now, regular trellis dinnerware should be marked with a generic Homer Laughlin back stamp like this one from 1931. I think another piece has the regular marking. This one, 1929. So something unusual about this decal, because when we see other Homer Laughlin decals, they usually end up on many other shapes. Even if it's the most exclusive of decal, it usually ends up somewhere, maybe even kitchen craft or oven serve. In this case, it was used by Hall China. So I'll try to get the comparison shot. This is Rose Parade with its cadet blue body. We'll look at the marking. Hall Superior Quality Kitchenware Made in USA Rose Parade. And you can see on the finial, it's our Trellis Rose decal. Although they cut a little piece off so it would fit on that small space of the finial. So that may be why we don't see this decal on other Homer Laughlin pieces, because Hall China took it over. So it's a nice little connective thread between these two potteries. So our next line is Tudor Rose, which is on the Wells shape, which was new in 1930. This advertisement comes from October 1930, and it shows all the pieces that were available in Tudor Rose for Quaker Oats. And we have the same assortment that we had with Trellis. And there's the 7-inch plate, oatmeal, fruit cup, teacup and saucer, covered sugar, and creamer. So there's the sugar bowl. Has a nice green edge line. Tudor Rose back stamp. And a creamer. We have another advertisement. This is from February 1931. Again, the same basic assortment. This photocopy shows some sketches of proposed Tudor Rose back stamps. And this one shows the ones that were under consideration in 1930. And you can see this one's been circled. That's the actual one that was selected. However, there are no pottery initials in this back stamp. So if other potteries were involved, they didn't note it anymore, like they did with Trellis and Ivory Color. We see the same phenomenon with Tudor Rose that we saw with Trellis, where pieces would have been marked, and then if they were seconds, they wouldn't have been used with the Quaker Oats promotion. Instead, they would get mixed in with lesser quality Wells dinnerware. So we have a 7-inch plate and a creamer. And with this creamer, it's pretty obvious, because you can see chunks of clay at the bottom. So they would not have sent this off for Quaker Oats. Instead, they decorate it with this decal. And this probably was part of a set where all the pieces were imperfect. The other pieces probably had generic Homer Laughlin back stamps, or maybe not even marked at all. But this one has that Tudor Rose marking, because marking something under glaze is one of the first things you do. So one last thing about Tudor Rose. I just mentioned with Trellis we don't see that little rose decal on any other pieces of Homer Laughlin, but this one you do. It was used on Ravenna, and it was also used on Orleans. We have an Orleans platter here. This is a 13-inch platter with our Tudor Rose center decal, and it is dated 1933. So that's going to be it for Tudor Rose and Trellis. Next time we'll look at Ravenna and Chelsea, which were made for Quaker Oats.